Alright guys, TouchCrab here back again today. Hope you're enjoying your Wednesday so far, and today we're going to talk about the potential of the CDL Friendship League. We have certainly seen with the switch to the 4 versus 4 environment, a lot of our pro players are now being stuck on the sidelines, and it does raise the question whether the pro players that are going to be in the league next season have been chosen off merit or whether they have been chosen based on their friendships. It's definitely a tough question to answer because certainly it exists to some degree. I believe we've seen Octane say that yes, he was kind of skeptical about joining the Dallas Empire with Hukili and Shotzi last season. He preferred to play with players who he was familiar with and he'd won with in the past, I suppose, and was friends with, of course, to some degree. The likes of Slacked, of course, that Octane had pretty good success with back in the day. And then you've also got Silly talking about in a recent Q&A that yes, when he started prioritizing friendships over necessarily playing with the best players in the world, that did, begin to cost his career, right? Because he's been around a very long time. When he did start a team with Arcites, Pristinian Gunless on the United Squad and Infinite Warfare, they immediately have great success, right? So that just shows what can be possible when you take a chance on players that you're not necessarily too familiar with before. However, that's not the end of the story, right? Because you can certainly say that yes, these guys are friends with these players, therefore they, are teaming together, but there's also an element of team chemistry, right? Like team chemistry helps a team be successful. It's understandable that people want to play with players who they are familiar with, and well, in a sense, that kind of pre-chemistry that exists into the team actually, well, makes sense, I suppose. So it's not quite as simple as just friendship versus actually getting there on merit. There is kind of a bit of both to the equation, but I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, what extent this is taking place in the Call of Duty community, because I definitely think there's a few examples we can look at here, and it's relatively unlikely that the 48 players that are going to be on starting teams this season are the 48 best players in the entire world. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like if you enjoy it, subscribe if you are new. As always, I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Before we get into that, I wanted to talk about this from Hitch Your Ride really quick, saying the Elgato off-season series kicks off with a $5,000 Modern Warfare 2 throwback tournament. All these big names in this one, so that's pretty cool to see another MW2 throwback tournament. I believe there's going to be a Ghost one coming not too far along the line. So, well, there's this podcast that comes out yesterday from Right Hero, Gaza, etc. And, well, they're discussing some of the pro players and, well, who they think should get a spot in the league and who, shouldn't get a spot. So, top 10 player that deserves. A lot of guys for the amateur scene, the likes of Parasite, Standy, of course, very talented player. Fire, Sibilance, Afro, of course, who was on the Team War squad at the end of the Modern Warfare season, who was very, very solid on that squad. I believe he is being considered by professional league teams. And, several other names from the amateur region as well. Pred, of course, who is being considered by the Paris Legion right now as it stands. And also franchises stay away, right? We looked at very quickly at the end of yesterday's video about, well, Gunless's response to this one. Aches, Accuracy, Gunless, Happy, and Slacked. So OP Sud is Happy. So, these are the guys that they reckon franchises should stay away from and not pick up for, chemistry reasons, but also maybe they don't think they're as good as, well, they are on paper, I suppose. So pros see this kind of stuff and immediately they have to take to Twitter to do a response, right? So, Accuracy says there was no reasoning. Then he comes back with, dude, you should have been dropped instead of Trey Zero. You held the subliners back. There is a reason New York was finally fed up and didn't keep you. I bet 5,000 out of my own hard-earned money that you don't last in Minnesota to the end of the next season. So, plenty of replies to this one. But yeah, interesting, right? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And, well, Gunner says he responds right here. And Alex says, should I watch the video? And Gaza says, don't watch it. Just look at this and ignore the rant I went on about how nasty Gunless is. Quick question in the middle of the vid. I'm curious as to why you'll call it a friendship league. We saw a lot of pros out during the Modern Warfare year, right? So yeah, certainly a number of players who did lose their spot in the Modern Warfare season, and I definitely think that it's becoming less and less of a thing. Like back in the day in Call of Duty, like friendships was like all that really mattered now, but nowadays, especially in the Modern Warfare season, we've seen a number of amateur players come into the Pro League that have been taken a chance on, I suppose, by some of the pro players, and have immediately become like, Mac and Awakening as two very good examples, I suppose, that have immediately been considered like, top 15, top 10 players in the game over the course of the season. So pretty impressive, and a lot of pros taking chances on these players now because they know it can be profitable and help them to win. Not necessarily was the case back in the day, but I still think it does exist to some degree still. As Parasite says, most pros that were out this year had either retired, had attitude issues, or were undeniably just bad. Average players were still kept around despite preventing teams from progressing to championship caliber consistency. Also, a lot of these players bring nothing innovative to a team. A lot of the league teams and amateurs need to work on their work ethic, attitudes, ego, game intellect, and critical thinking. These issues are the reason why the same players and teams consistently win every single year. Sure, there are outliers, but the top is always the top. The fact that the only way to get into the league or be pushed out is to have undeniably good or bad gameplay habits or personality issues is sad. The league standard of entry is being average and having connections. It's comedic, and it shows every year in the standings. Atom Chris, no, I'm good, soft as hell. No, you picked me up and I won. That was the team we were just discussing the United squads back in Infinite Warfare. So interesting statements here really from Parasite, saying that like a lot of the players that lost their spot last season were just bad players, right? Like straight up bad, nowhere near Pro League caliber. A lot of the players who kept their spots that were kind of mediocre were keeping their spots but not really bringing anything to the team. We've heard Crimsix and Clayster talk at length really about how a lot of players just play to keep their spots, and part of keeping your spots is keeping connections, right? It's being in someone's DMs and being always an option on the table that maybe they've done something with in the past, and I think that that could be an option going forwards because, you know, people like familiarity, right? They like to play with someone who they've played with in the past and maybe they got to a grand finals an event with or something like that, or they enjoy scrimming with, and certainly enjoying playing with your team is like a good, well, it definitely correlates, I suppose, with success. If you know you're going to have a fun time scrimming with the team and you know you're going to enjoy the game playing with a certain team, there's definitely a benefit to that, right? So it's difficult to exactly weed out exactly where friendship stops and where like merit begins, I suppose, because friendship is definitely an ideal thing, right? You look at Scump and Formal, they did fall out for a while, but you're not looking at Scump and Formal and thinking, oh, you know, he's only in the league because they're, you know, friendships or whatever, but they play well together, they have good team chemistry, and also they're nasty players, right? So there's obviously a line to be drawn somewhere, but it's, well, somewhat difficult to do. So here's where the Call of Duty League came out a couple of days ago with the announced players so far for the Modern Warfare season, and how many of these players have been picked up just due to their friendships, right? Because you can look at, I think the two examples that people would most easily look at would be the Rocker and Seattle Surge, because people were saying that Looney was only picked up because he's friends with Gunless and he's played with Octane in the past and is friends with him, I suppose, and Pristini's only here because he's friends with Gunless. But that's not necessarily the entire story, right? Like, it's not just about friendship, it's about team chemistry in the sense that, yes, these guys are going to get on, they've had good success with each other in the past, so it certainly makes sense to make this kind of move. But at the same time, I suppose you could argue that, well, some of these players aren't necessarily as naturally gifted as maybe some of the amateur players. Like, there's been a lot of talk about guys like Standy lately from the amateur community could potentially come in and, well, take a team up to the next level. Then again, though, if the team chemistry isn't there, and that does, I suppose, stem from friendship to some degree, and you kind of know what the chemistry is going to be like going into a team, if you've teamed with these guys before, then, you know, it gets to a point where can you really justify that, right? And I think it's a similar discussion with accuracy on Minnesota Rocky here. A lot of people tend to talk about accuracy in terms of this, like, friendship league type of perspective, and of course, teaming with Attach for a while, but accuracy clearly, like, he's a winning player. He's won with a number of different teams over a number of different seasons, and yes, he might not be the most mechanically gifted assault rifle in the game, but he certainly knows how to win. He knows how to put a team together. He knows how to take a chance on young stars, I suppose, as he did with Mac this season. So, you know, there's a lot of facets of his character and his gameplay and his personality, which you look at and you think, well, fair enough, there's a reason why he's still in this league, not necessarily just because he happens to be friends with Attach. There's other things that he brings to the table, right? And, well, I suppose the team chemistry that is expected with Attach is one of those things, especially in a 4v4 environment. There are, I suppose, a few examples, and I think the most common example I would be able to most easily give would be the New York Subliners squad of last season, because you look at New York, and this, of course, well, I'm missing it down here at the bottom left-hand side, and, well, we had Happy on the bench last season, and I think that, honestly, like, if there was any move, really, last season, it was almost like a disrespectful move to the amateur scene. To me, it was putting Happy on the bench, because I can't see how this was ever going to work. This is OP Suda, as those guys were just talking about. He was brought in for one event after they, well, they subbed out Trey Zero Morris. He obviously then went to London a few months later, but they subbed him out. They brought in Happy for one event. Happy had like a 0.7 at that event. It wasn't pretty at all. I can't see really how that was ever going to work, but he's been friends with a few of these guys on this team for a few years prior, and I think really the only reason he got a substitute spot was because he was having to be friends with those guys in the past, and they thought, okay, you know, maybe we'll take a chance on him, like maybe it'll work out, and like he can get 50k guaranteed salary on the bench, I suppose. And well, it didn't really work out when he did need to be substituted in, and I'm sure there would have been a lot better amateur players out there. Like, not too long after that, they then brought in Mac, right, and got much better at the game. So definitely I think that example is one, and obviously that was only on the bench. The other example that people commonly point to is Slack, for example, over at the Seattle Surge, but I don't really think this is necessarily justified. Like, I think he's relatively underrated over the course of his career. He's won a number of different events with a number of different teams, had some pretty good success over a number of different titles. So, you know, I'm happy for Slack to still get a spot in the league. I'm not sure he actually will do this season. It's somewhat uncertain where he's going to go, and maybe, you know, there's a good degree of complacency that comes with playing with some of the best players in the world for a number of different seasons, and yes, you're a crucial aspect to that team, but as soon as, like, you have a bad season alongside Octane, then Octane wants to go a different route, and now, you know, you're in a difficult spot, I suppose. And we'll have to see whether he does manage to make a spot work going into the Black Ops Cold War season. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you are new. As always, I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm. Just to finish off with a couple of funny clips, this one especially from Crimsix. Bravo 6 going dark. We saw him not too long ago talking about his $22,000 pair of night vision goggles that he bought with, well, some of his champs winnings. These, I think, were some even more expensive ones, like these MVGs, $40,000 to $50,000 $1,000, and well, he was in some special video to promote Warzone and stuff. Pretty cool to see, and yeah, I just thought this was pretty funny. Thanks for watching as always, and I will see you next time.
Crimsix, going dark.